There's an insect hiding in cracks near your bed right now that has killed more people this year than sharks have killed in the last century combined. It doesn't roar, it doesn't sting, it doesn't even hurt when it bites you. And that's exactly what makes it the most dangerous bug on the entire planet. Tonight, we're going to meet the kissing bug, a creature with a name so gentle it sounds like a joke, attached to a kill count that puts almost every other animal on Earth to shame. By the end of this video, you'll understand why doctors are calling it a silent epidemic, why it's already living in your own backyard, whether you're ready to believe that or not, and why the real killer isn't even the bug itself, a name that lies to you. Picture a flat, oval-shaped insect about half an inch to an inch long, with a body that looks almost armored, dark brown or black, often lined with streaks of orange or red along the edges. That coloring isn't decoration. In the insect world, that kind of pattern is usually a warning sign that says, "Stay away from me." Most creatures wearing that combination are venomous. But the kissing bug isn't venomous at all. Its bite barely registers. Some victims sleep straight through it. Scientists believe this coloring might actually be a bluff, a costume borrowed from more dangerous insects to keep predators at a distance while it goes about its business undisturbed. The name kissing bug comes from where it prefers to bite the soft, thin skin around your lips and eyes, areas rich in blood vessels close to the surface. It sounds almost affectionate. It is anything but. These insects belong to a group of assassin bugs, true predatory insects armed with a sharp, needle-like mouthpart normally used to stab and liquefy other insects before drinking them like a milkshake. Most assassin bugs are a nightmare if you're another bug, but a minor annoyance if you're a human, a painful bite, maybe a welt, and that's the end of the story. The kissing bug's branch of the family tree split off from the rest of the assassin bugs somewhere around 100 million years ago and made a very different evolutionary choice. Instead of hunting insects, they turned to something far more reliable in the dry caves and rock crevices where they lived: the blood of mammals, bats, rodents, and eventually, us, the bug that poops its way into you. Here is the detail that makes people's skin crawl every single time they hear it, and there's no way to say it gently, so let's just say it. The kissing bug's bite isn't what makes it dangerous. Its bathroom habits are . When a kissing bug feeds, it gorges itself on blood for several minutes, and because it needs room for that next meal, it defecates almost immediately, often right on the spot where it just bit you. That waste is loaded with a microscopic parasite. While you're asleep, unaware that anything happened, that parasite-laden waste sits on your skin next to a fresh puncture wound. Then morning comes. You wake up with an itch near your eye or the corner of your mouth. You do exactly what anyone would do. You rub it. And in that single unconscious motion, you press the parasite directly into the bite wound, or into your eye, or into your mouth. That's the moment the real infection begins. Not from a fang, not from venom, but from an insect's droppings, and a 5-second reflex you don't even remember making. Scientists have a name for the parasite responsible: Trypanosoma cruzi, and it isn't an animal, a bacterium, a virus, or a fungus. It's an entirely separate branch of life, a single-celled organism that swims using a whip-like tail, more closely related to certain pond-dwelling microbes than to anything we'd normally call an infection. Nobody is entirely sure which animal it originally infected millions of years ago. The leading guess is that it started in bats, or rodents living in the same caves as the earliest kissing bugs, and simply found a new way to spread once those bugs discovered a taste for mammal blood. The disease that waits decades to strike the illness this parasite causes is called Chagas disease, named after the Brazilian physician who first identified it in the early 20th century. And if you're designing the perfect disease to slip past modern medicine unnoticed, Chagas would be close to a blueprint. The first phase, called the acute phase, kicks in within the first few weeks of infection. For most people, it feels like nothing more than a mild flu, a low fever, some fatigue, maybe swollen glands. Some people develop a telltale but easily missed symptom called a chagoma, a swollen, non-itchy, painless lump at the site of the bite. If the parasite entered through the eyelid can swell dramatically in a sign doctors call Romagn's sign, a puffy, painless swelling that looks alarming but usually isn't itself painful, which is exactly why so many people just shrug it off and wait for it to go away on its own. And that's the trap. because it usually does go away on its own at least. The symptoms do. The parasite doesn't leave. It burrows into your muscle cells, particularly in the heart and digestive tract, and simply goes quiet. It can sit there, completely undetected, for 10 years, 20 years, even 50 years. Standard blood tests won't catch it during this dormant stretch, because by then, the parasite itself has mostly disappeared from the bloodstream. It's living inside your own cells instead, out of reach. For roughly 70% of infected people, it may genuinely stay dormant for life and never cause a serious problem. But for the remaining 30%, it eventually wakes up, and when it does, it doesn't announce itself gently. When the silent killer speaks, the most devastating outcome of chronic Chagas disease is what doctors call Chagas cardiomyopathy. Over years or decades, the parasite quietly damages heart muscle tissue, replacing healthy muscle with scar tissue, enlarging the heart and scrambling its electrical signals. The result can be irregular heartbeats, progressive heart failure, and in the worst cases, sudden cardiac death in a person who, right up until that moment, may have looked and felt perfectly healthy. In the most severe cases, a heart transplant becomes the only remaining option. The digestive system can suffer just as badly. The parasite damages the nerves controlling the esophagus and colon, leading to conditions where these organs stop moving food properly. In advanced cases, the esophagus can become so damaged that swallowing becomes difficult and food gets stuck, sometimes leading to malnutrition or repeated lung infections. The colon can become so enlarged and dysfunctional that waste can no longer pass normally, a condition serious enough to require surgery. And here's a detail that should worry anyone facing surgery for an unrelated reason. Chagas disease is a master of disguise. It can cause joint pain and muscle pain that looks identical to arthritis or a torn tendon. A surgeon operating on what looks like a routine orthopedic problem might completely miss that the real cause is a decades-old parasitic infection, quietly damaging nerves and tissue throughout the body, meaning the surgery fixes nothing, and the real disease continues untouched while the clock keeps ticking toward heart failure. A more frightening top 10 list than you'd expect if someone asked you to name the deadliest animals on Earth. You'd probably think of sharks, lions, or venomous snakes. The actual list looks almost nothing like that. Crocodiles account for roughly 1,000 human deaths a year. Tapeworms cause around 2,000. Roundworms are responsible for close to 2,500. Freshwater snails, which spread a parasitic disease through contaminated water, cause around 10,000 deaths annually. The kissing bug sits in that same range, tied at roughly 10,000 deaths a year, alongside the tsetse fly, another blood-feeding insect that spreads a different parasite entirely. Dogs, mostly through rabies transmission in regions with limited vaccination access, account for around 25,000 deaths. Snakes cause roughly 50,000. Other humans account for close to 500,000 deaths a year through violence. And sitting at the very top of the list, far above every other creature combined, mosquitoes kill close to 700,000 people annually. Notice what's missing from the top of that list. Sharks aren't there. Spiders aren't there. The animals we're taught to fear the most are nowhere near the deadliest. And notice something else. Almost every insect on that list isn't dangerous because of a bite, a sting, or venom. It's dangerous because of what rides along inside it. The kissing bug doesn't need fangs or poison. It just needs to poop in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it becomes one of the deadliest creatures alive. Why this isn't just a tropical problem anymore. For most of the 20th century, Chagas disease was considered a problem confined to Mexico, Central America, and South America, something people in North America and Europe never needed to think about. That assumption no longer holds. Kissing bugs have now been documented in more than 30 U.S. states, concentrated heavily across the South and Southwest, but expanding steadily northward. Locally acquired human infections, meaning cases where someone was actually bitten and infected within the country, rather than picking it up while traveling abroad, have already been confirmed in states including Texas, Arizona, California, Louisiana, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi, and Tennessee. Health officials increasingly argue that Chagas disease should now be classified as endemic to parts of the United States, not just an imported tropical curiosity. Climate change is a major driver of that spread. Kissing bugs thrive in warm conditions, and as average temperatures creep upward, the range where they can survive winter and reproduce successfully keeps pushing further north. Deforestation and expanding urban development push the bugs out of their natural cave and burrow habitats and directly into human neighborhoods, where cracks in walls, gaps around doors, and cluttered outdoor spaces make perfect substitute hiding places. Wildlife is part of the chain too. The parasite has been found in opossums, raccoons, armadillos, coyotes, and even in dogs and cats, meaning there's already a hidden reservoir of infection sitting quietly in wild and domestic animal populations across a huge portion of the country. The good news buried in that detail is that Chagas disease does not spread casually between people or animals. You cannot catch it from a cough, a handshake, or simply being near an infected person or pet. Transmission requires direct contact with the parasite itself, typically through a bite, contaminated food, blood transfusion, organ transplant, or from a mother to her unborn child. Hunting in the dark, kissing bugs are nocturnal, and they've evolved a genuinely unsettling set of tools for finding you in total darkness. Like several other blood-feeding insects, they track the carbon dioxide you exhale with every breath, following that invisible trail through the air until they're close enough to detect your body heat directly. Many kissing bug species even have noticeably large compound eyes for a nocturnal insect, likely tuned to help them detect infrared light and movement in near-total darkness as they close the final distance to a sleeping target. That same sensitivity to light is part of why they end up near people at all. Porch lights, window lights, and outdoor lighting attract them from surprising distances, drawing them toward houses they'd otherwise never approach. Once near a building, they slip through gaps around doors, window screens, and wall cracks, then wait out the daylight hours hidden in furniture, bedding, or wall voids before emerging at night to feed. Their bite itself is almost engineered for stealth, because it typically targets the thin vascular skin around the mouth and eyes and causes little to no pain. Most people never wake up during the bite itself. The only clue the next morning is an itchy, unremarkable-looking welt, easily mistaken for a mosquito bite, a pimple, or a cold sore. Nothing about it screams danger. And that's precisely the problem. An evolutionary accident, not a design. It's worth pausing here to appreciate just how strange this entire arrangement actually is from an evolutionary standpoint. The ancestors of the kissing bug were never trying to become one of the deadliest disease vectors on the planet. Somewhere around 100 million years ago, a branch of ordinary insect-hunting assassin bugs simply found themselves living in caves and rock shelters where insect prey was scarce, but mammals were plentiful. Switching to mammal blood as a food source was a survival decision, nothing more. The parasite that now rides along inside them was almost certainly already circulating in the bats and rodents these bugs fed on, long before humans ever entered the picture. The bug didn't choose to become dangerous. It became a courier almost by accident, carrying a passenger that had already been thriving in the wild for millions of years before either of them ever encountered a human being. That accident of evolution is exactly why the danger only became a human problem once we started building homes close to the same caves, rock piles, and burrows these insects and their animal hosts had occupied for millennia. In a very real sense, the kissing bug didn't move into our world, we moved into theirs. Diagnosis is its own battle. Even when someone suspects they might be infected, actually confirming it isn't simple. During the first few months of infection, the parasite can sometimes be found directly in the bloodstream through microscopic examination of a fresh blood sample. But once the acute phase passes and the infection settles into its dormant chronic stage, that direct detection method stops working. Doctors instead have to rely on antibody blood tests to determine whether someone was ever infected, and even then, diagnosing organ damage requires a completely different set of tools: cardiac imaging and ECGs for heart involvement, and imaging studies like barium swallow tests or abdominal X-rays for digestive complications. Treatment carries its own frustrating catch. 2 antiparasitic medications exist that can potentially cure the infection, but they're only genuinely effective during the acute phase, shortly after infection, while the parasite is still circulating freely in the blood. Once the disease reaches its chronic stage and the parasite has burrowed into organ tissue, these same medications can no longer reverse the damage that's already been done at that point. Treatment shifts entirely toward managing symptoms, rather than curing the underlying disease. In the United States, these medications aren't even available through a regular pharmacy. They have to be specifically obtained through public health channels. Because so few doctors ever think to test for a disease, most were taught belonged to a different continent. This combination of vague early symptoms, a long silent period, and a disease most physicians were never trained to suspect is exactly why global health organizations classify Chagas disease as a neglected tropical disease. It's serious enough to kill tens of thousands of people every year, yet it receives a tiny fraction of the research funding and public awareness of far less deadly conditions. Who actually bears the weight of this disease? There's an uncomfortable pattern behind who ends up infected and who ends up suffering the worst outcomes. Kissing bugs thrive in homes with cracks in the walls, gaps in the roofing, and limited access to pest control, conditions far more common in low-income and rural housing than in well-maintained urban homes. The same communities most exposed to the bug itself, frequently the ones with the least access to the blood tests that could catch the infection early and the specialized medications needed to treat it. This pattern repeats itself across Latin America and inside the United States alike. Chagas disease has earned a reputation as a disease of poverty, not because of anything about who the parasite chooses to infect, but because of who has the resources to detect and treat it before it becomes irreversible. Public health campaigns that combine community education, trained medical staff, and accessible testing have shown genuinely dramatic results where they've been implemented seriously in one well-documented program in Bolivia. Health workers tested well over 180,000 people and successfully treated more than 18,000 infections over roughly a decade, proving that this disease is entirely beatable wherever it's taken seriously. What actually protects you? None of this means you need to abandon hiking, camping, or spending time outdoors. The genuine risk comes overwhelmingly from prolonged, close contact with the environments where kissing bugs live and hide, rural housing with structural gaps, animal burrows, wood piles, and outdoor shelters used by wildlife, not from a casual afternoon outside. The most effective defenses are almost frustratingly simple. Seal cracks and gaps around doors, windows, and walls, especially in older or rural housing. Keep outdoor lighting to a minimum near entry points, since bright lights are one of the biggest draws that pull these insects toward a home in the first place. Use bed nets in regions with known infestations, and if you ever spot an insect you suspect might be a kissing bug, resist the urge to crush it instead. Carefully trap it in a sealed container and contact your local health department, since identifying and mapping where these insects are actually spreading is one of the most valuable tools public health officials have for tracking the disease's advance. A disease with a human face numbers on a screen rarely capture what a disease actually does to a life. So it helps to walk through what a real case can look like from start to finish. Somewhere in a rural home, a child is bitten while sleeping. The bite goes unnoticed. A few weeks later, there's a mild fever, maybe a swollen eyelid, that a worried parent assumes is an allergic reaction or a minor infection. It clears up on its own within a month, exactly the way a normal childhood illness would. Nobody thinks about it again. 30 years have passed. That same person, now in their 40s, starts noticing they get winded walking upstairs. Their heart occasionally skips or races for no obvious reason. A doctor orders an ECG expecting to find nothing serious, and instead finds an enlarged heart with visible scarring and an irregular rhythm. Standard cardiac workups look for high cholesterol, blocked arteries, high blood pressure, none of which explain what's actually happening. It can take years of specialist visits before anyone thinks to test for a tropical parasite, because the disease was never on anyone's radar in the first place. By the time it's caught, the antiparasitic medications that could have cured the infection decades earlier are no longer able to reverse the damage. The only remaining options are managing heart failure symptoms for the rest of that person's life, or in the most severe cases, a heart transplant. This is exactly the pattern doctors describe when they call Chagas disease a silent killer. It isn't silent because it's rare. It's silent because it hides in plain sight for so long that by the time it speaks, it's already rewritten the rules of treatment. Millions carrying a secret they don't know about globally. Somewhere between 6 and 8 million people are currently living with a Chagas infection, and health officials estimate the disease causes around 50,000 deaths every year. tens of millions more live in regions where exposure risk is considered high. The overwhelming majority of infected people have no idea they're carrying the parasite at all, because the acute phase symptoms are so easy to mistake for an ordinary flu, and because routine medical checkups almost never include a Chagas screening unless a doctor has a specific reason to suspect it. One of the few reliable ways infections are actually discovered has nothing to do with symptoms at all. Since blood banks in a growing number of countries began screening donated blood for the parasite, blood donation has quietly become one of the most effective tools for catching hidden infections. Someone donates blood purely out of civic duty, and the screening process is what finally reveals an infection that had been sitting undetected for years or even decades. A parasite that doesn't need a bug at all. While the kissing bug is by far the most common way people become infected, it isn't the only route, and that matters more than most people realize. The parasite can pass directly from an infected mother to her unborn child during pregnancy, meaning a baby can be born already carrying the infection without ever being bitten by anything. It can also spread through contaminated food or drink in regions where the bugs or their waste can come into contact with produce, juice, or other consumables during preparation. Outbreaks traced to contaminated fruit juice have been documented in parts of South America, and because the parasite can survive in blood and tissue, it can also be transmitted through blood transfusions and organ transplants if proper screening isn't in place. This is part of why global health officials increasingly push back against treating Chagas disease as simply a bug bite problem. The insect is the most common delivery method, but the disease itself has multiple pathways into the human body, which makes it considerably harder to control through insect avoidance alone. The bigger truth hiding inside this story. What makes the kissing bug story so unsettling isn't cruelty or aggression. This insect isn't hunting you out of malice. It's doing exactly what its ancestors have done for 100 million years, finding a warm-blooded meal, feeding, and moving on. The devastation that follows is an accident of biology, a parasite that happened to find a very effective way to hop from one mammal to another, using an insect's digestive habits as its delivery system. That's arguably the most disturbing part of this entire story. The deadliest insects on the planet, mosquitoes, tsetse flies, and kissing bugs, aren't dangerous because of venom, aggression, or size. They're dangerous because they're extraordinarily good delivery systems for something else entirely. Something microscopic. Something that doesn't care whether you ever see it coming. Somewhere tonight, in a crack in a wall, under a pile of firewood, or behind a loose piece of siding, one of these insects is waiting for the lights to go out. It isn't loud. It isn't aggressive. It doesn't need to be either of those things. It just needs you to be asleep, and it needs you to scratch an itch tomorrow morning without thinking twice. If this kept you up at night, that was the plan. Subscribe to Midnight Crawlers, because we go looking in the places most people are too afraid or too disgusted to check. New videos every day.